approach to it, so that you could actually traverse the book and actually acquire it slowly, step by step. So let's talk about the Muqaddima, Dr. Stef.
We have been talking about
the Muqaddima as a book specifically. Let's talk about this Muqaddima because we've been mentioning it, dropping a few hints here and there, trying to praise it as the greatest work written on this topic by any mind, anywhere, at any time in human history. And Toynbee was a very famous historian in his own right. So Mark Zuckerberg, as you mentioned, actually he recommended the book in his reading club as a book that must be read. So al-Muqaddimah, what is this book? Why is it important for us as students of history?
A very valid question. First of all, it is not a history book. No, it is not a history book. As we mentioned, Ibn Khaldun was a polymath. So as Yasser mentioned also before, as a polymath, you expect in his book to find pretty much everything. And believe it or not, pretty much everything is there. From Islamic science to biology, from sociology to maths, from economics to linguistics. Everything you need when you go to university and you have a general education is pretty much there. The Muqaddimah itself, again, is divided into 6 chapters. Okay, starts with history, meaning who are people? What is humanity? What is mankind? Okay, how do we live? How do we build societies?
And already in there, he talks about many economic principles.
He mentions that, yes. But chapter 6 is the main one, isn't
it?
It is
the main one.
You're right.
But the thing sprinkled throughout the book, the principles, these ideas, economic, sociology, study of ethnic people. He has it sprinkled throughout the book, but it fits all together, which is brilliant.
He's the first one also who mentions in his book, by the way, that people are influenced by the climate they live in.
Yes.
The environment.
You could argue he's very deterministic.
He's in many ways.
If you were to look at him nowadays, at his work, you could argue that he's very deterministic.
However, do we not have this debate of nature versus nurture?
Yes, we do. Yes.
Which is to a degree, nurture includes the society, the environment, the climate you live in. It's not uncommon today to say the climate of this or of that has caused this population to go this way or that way. Sociology is based on that now, studying the wider impact of your society. So for someone in the 14th century to actually say, wait a second here, you know, the climates of people, the diets, even the temperature of where they live, the latitude. I mean, this, for me, is just it's a fascinating and really ahead of his time to have considered all of this when he's actually analyzing. And of course, he went astray in certain areas, but no human endeavor can always be right. However, he laid a foundation in this book that, as you said, Yasser, economics, taxation, how to treat employees,
setting up the whole system, a government structure, everything. Yes.
And he analyzes the dynasties of his time, the Al-Murabitun, the Nasrids, all of these different, the Mamluks, looking at what went right, what went wrong. He also does an analysis of the Umayyads, the Abbasids. So in his worldview, you find all the different elements necessary, and in his book, you find the ingredients there. So he has, as you mentioned, 6 chapters. I mean, it's quite difficult for us to actually encapsulate everything. But what's important for us when we say the Muqaddimah, as it currently is, the actual book, is only one element of the full 6 books.
It's just an introduction.
I did want to mention that.
Prolegomena, as they say in Greek, you know, it is very nicely translated as prolegomena, which is an introduction.
This video is sponsored by the Muqaddima program.
For nearly 7 centuries, Ibn Khaldun's Muqaddimah has been read and studied by scholars and students of history, sociology, politics and economics as the single most authoritative and astounding work of classical scholarship in the field of history.
Embark on an enlightening educational venture led by Muslim scholars and teachers delving into Islamic history, sociology, economics and beyond. Engage with cutting-edge learning cues and multimedia components, allowing for a deeper understanding of the topics. Distinguish between the lies and the truths of the narratives told, between reliable and unreliable sources. Equip yourself with the skills to conduct deep research and build confidence to combat Islamophobia. Come and strengthen your Muslim identity today. Grab the course in the video description.
And it was supposed to be introduction, by the way. The main book was Kitab al-Abar, he wrote actually.
Yes, this is like one of the 3
the 3 volumes that are translated into English.
3 volumes, exactly, which was split later on. It was 1 volume, when he wrote it, when he created it, it was 1 big volume, but it was split later on by later scholars as well. So that in itself, that shows that it's such a monumental work.
It is.
And I think, yes, it's structured in a way that you have the the general principles in the beginning, which is the Muqaddima,
Yes.
and then you get into the Arabs, the Berbers, when he starts talking about, as you said, the dynasties. So then he goes back to his general principles
Yes.
and applies them.
Almost as if theory, then practice.
Then practice,
okay?
yes.
Which is what we replicate in our Muqaddima program. The theory, so you study the Muqaddima and the principles, then the practice, the Islamic history. So the Muqaddima in Arabic means the introduction, the prologue, the entry points. And so he's going to teach you now the basis of Islamic history, or history generally, what you must absolutely understand before you can go into delving into the detail of history. So, and quite interestingly, he does have some very scathing remarks about previous...
he's very brutal.
Exactly, very brutal.
Well, he calls animals dumb, which I find, but this is, again, it's a translation. I think that's very important, again, to see that taking this now out of this, when you read something, we spoke about the author that you need to know, and his background, biography, where he came from and all this, but also you need to understand the way of thinking of a specific time period. Okay, we're talking about the 1300s, guys. Here we're not talking about the 1900s and 2000s. We're talking about the 1300s. So and it's a translation. So again, we are now talking about the abridged version and translated into English, which we have to look into the Arabic version as well. And he does mention in the Arabic version, by the way, that they are dumb animals, so animals that don't. What he means with that, they're not intelligent.
It's a linguistic.
It's
in
linguistic.
Arabic, it's more subtle. It's more. It makes more sense.
It's probably
they don't have akal. It's just without akal. It doesn't mean you're stupid. It means you don't have the capacity to reason. Yeah.
But the translation of dumb is not really very...
Exactly.
But with regards to being brutal, I meant that he's brutal to previous historians.
Not even historians, Yasser. He doesn't call them historians. There's a difference between historians and chroniclers and biographers.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, because it's not all the same thing. A chronicler gives you the date, the event, details. Doesn't necessarily validate, doesn't think logically about how do these things connect.
Yes, I remember.
A biography just gives you, his name was this. A historian in the sense of a Muqaddima historian.
The Ibn Khaldun's
you're thinking logically.
But there's nobody before him.
That's his appeal, actually. That's why we consider him the first Anal.
That's right.
Yeah, he's considering. Let me give you an example. One of the classical Muslim historians, he's writing about, as many other historians did in the past, al-Bidayah wa Nihaya, the history of mankind from the beginning till the end. And in the process of doing that, he's describing how Banu Israel left Egypt. And he mentions that they had 600,000 soldiers.
Oh my God, that one, yes.
Oh, that one with the numbers, yes,
and
you're absolutely
he's
right.
very logical about it. Yeah, you can carry on, but
So
yes.
Ibn Khaldun cites this as an example of not using analytical, critical thinking.
Yeah.
How is it possible in Egypt at the time
With the
to have
geography.
600,000 based on the geography,
Based on the
geography,
food,
the
it's
economy,
again, how you see
the
how
food,
other fields of knowledge play a role into there. That you cannot just purely know history as you said, a chronological sense where you just mark down what is said or what was said. You have to also think about it logically, as you said, how he applies logic to it. And the only way for you to really apply logic is by understanding at least the principles, general principles of other fields.
Was it possible, given the fact Egypt had a certain amount of people at the time, for example, and a slave nation, sorry to jump in there, having 600,000 soldiers, when even the army of Fir'aun, till this very day, is actually arguable whether they have 600,000 soldiers. But the point being, he said, he almost laughed at it. That this was something that was taken seriously.
Yes.
Yeah?
Amongst many other things, this specific one reminded me of my time when I became Muslim 30 years ago, when I was watching these debates by Sheikh Ahmed Didat. I don't know if you remember, you must know of it. Sheikh Ahmed Didat, who was talking exactly about how can this be? In the Bible, this passage talks about 20,000, and in another passage it talks about 200,000.
I like what you've both said, really. Sometimes modern minds may look at what's been written in the past in classical times and think this is illogical. How could this have happened? Yes, right?
Yeah.
But sometimes, because you have an emotional investment in it, you may not want to criticize it being illogical, because a scholar wrote it
That's right,
1,000 years ago. Ibn Khaldun makes it okay. He says, look, you are allowed to use your brain here. It doesn't make any sense,
True.
because there are principles that cannot be violated. And he does
like
it from a
that.
position of being an
Cannot be
authority.
violated,
He's an authority in fiqh. So he uses the, you could say, the istinbat method of deductive reasoning, basically. he uses qiyas, he uses all of these very well-established principles in Islamic tradition already. He brings it into the historical field to say, look, even in history, there are stringent measures that we have to apply.
Yeah, and that's exactly
It's not anything goes kind of policy of
Yes,
just
exactly.
say what you like. So I love that because it gives you that ability to deduct reasonably a historical analysis. And I believe for that reason, the Western audience takes to him a lot more. He's very analytical, very logical, and deductive.
So
in his
what you're
reasoning.
saying now is amazing. The Western audience takes to him more. Why? Because he's a Muslim. Again, and this is something that really, I think it's totally forgotten by, I've heard so many Western historians and Western scholars talking about Ibn Khaldun on the BBC, for example, or on other channels and other programs. They talk about Ibn Khaldun and they don't mention at all, as I mentioned before, that you will find so many Islamic elements in his book. They totally ignore that. In a conversation, I remember there was a specific conversation on the BBC once, for example, where they speak about Ibn Khaldun, 3 scholars, all non-Muslims.
Yes.
And mention Ibn Khaldun, and there's a question, was he a religious scholar?
Yes.
And one of them says no.
Yes.
So what do you want to say by that now?
Dr. Stef, this is 2 things. Sorry to jump in, because it's a very good point you mentioned. 2 things. Number 1, the authorities in the English language or in French are usually non-Muslims,
Yes.
speaking on behalf of Ibn Khaldun. To say that he wasn't a religious authority is ridiculous.
It's ridiculous, yes.
He
was
was
a
Qadi
Muslim.
Qudda. This was the
Absolutely.
highest position in Egypt when it came to
Absolutely.
Islamic law. He was elected 4 times. So there's no way he could not have been. They tried to frame him as a secular authority
That's
because
what
if it's
they-
logical.
exactly.
There's
But
no
the
way
book
to
is full
divorce
of
him.
elements that doesn't
It is,
fit
yes.
at all.
I tell you, it's because they inflate Islam with Christianity. They inflate actually not just Islam. They inflate every other religion. Every religion is together with Christianity, as in the Dark Ages, as they say. But when it was the Dark Ages, the Muslims had their golden age,
Yes.
and it was a golden age of reason. And
Yeah, the logic, exactly, that's why I said before.
It comes to the other point with regards to the Ottomans, as you've mentioned a lot. With regards to the Ottomans, who were the ones that were preserving and actually was stopping the church from destroying Greek sources? It was the Ottomans, especially at the time when they had taken the Greek peninsula.
That's the thing, you're right. There is a misappropriation of who the author was and what his book is about.
Yeah.
By the French, the British, sometimes the Greek, so on and so forth. The fact that it's actually is written as the, how do you pronounce it in Greek?
Prolegomena.
That's the classical name for it in the Western field.
So they use the Greek
The
as
Greek.
this is the ultimate language actually,
Yes.
and the ultimate culture that you have to look into civilization. No mention at all of him being an Arab, no mention at all of
Exactly.
him being a Muslim, which is for me is
Yes.
more important than him being an Arab. Because if we look at Islamic history, you see a lot of Persian scholarships and so on. So it's not him being an Arab, that's not at all important, but it's important that he saw himself as a Muslim. And he saw himself as being the bridge between Europe, Al-Andalus, and the Arab world or the Muslim world, subhanAllah. And this I find amazing.
Has it been, now that you mentioned the book itself in classical terms, for an intellectual in England or France, for example, 100 years ago, they would not have read Muqaddima, they would have read the title you've mentioned. It would be presented as a Greek work, and as we've seen in the article,
Yes,
he's
yes.
described as the final Greek
Yes.
and the first anal French thinker.
Yes.
So his identity, his thinking has been almost repackaged
Yeah.
as a Western,
Yeah.
so he's been misappropriated in many ways. Ibn Khaldun is important because people don't realize, just like Pedro took him in and tried to get his information as to how the Muslims were doing in North Africa, later on in history, during the French colonial administration in Algeria, for example, they were reading al-Muqaddima,
Right.
translating it and using it against
Against
the
their own
Berbers.
subjects.
Against the Berbers, because they are.
Yes.
Yes, that's
Because
right.
he
That
wrote
was-
a lot about the Berbers. Ibn
That's right.
Khaldun was also at times sent to negotiate with the Berber tribes in the desert on behalf of the actual administration.
Yes, he was interacting with actual, what he would call Beduin. It's very interesting because when he mentions in the book, just a quick side note, when he mentions in the book with regards to Beduin, he doesn't necessarily mean the Arab Bedouin. He means the Bedouin lifestyle. So he would consider Berbers Bedouins, the Bedouins of the Arabian Peninsula, Bedouins, but also very interestingly, the Slavs in
Europe.
nowadays former Yugoslavia in Europe, he would also consider them Beduins.
And the Russians are Bedouins, and even the Russians, yeah.
Yes,
exactly.
It's desert culture. I mean, he basically makes it more clearer with calling it the desert culture and the urban civilization.
Yes, that's how he splits it. But but what I found personally interesting was exactly that. The Bedouin, for him the term is more used. It's interchangeable with regards to the Arab Bedouin, but it's also, for him, he uses it in the sense of lifestyle. So diet. So it's very restricted diet. Economic life is necessities. So
no luxury.
Focusing on necessities, no luxury, and living in harsh environments that makes them. And he would say that they have a lot of virtues. So they're honest,
and
brave.
And the vices are usually, as a faqih again, he's using his fiqh training. He talks about daruriyat, the necessities. Tahsiniyat, these are the you could say the luxuries.
3 to 4 levels.
Yes,
sort
exactly.
Of thing, yeah.
So daruriyat are the base essentials. If you look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, the very basic ones, we'll translate as being daruriyat in fiqh terms. Their problems are usually basic problems. They're very simple people. Their vices are very simple: how to eat, how to drink. They have wars about water, for example.
That's true. He doesn't necessarily say they have no vices. They're very simple.
Simple vices that can be fixed easily.
The city people that make these vices into.
It's luxurious.
Yeah,
you're talking about adultery, you're talking about bribery, because they've reached a level now in the social hierarchy that their needs are more sophisticated, therefore the vices
are more sophisticated as well.
Exactly.
That's his point. They're more complex. So it's not just a simple adultery, it's a sinister version of adultery, which I find it's very interesting.
Well, we do it today, isn't it? You know, again, just to walk on the other side of the discussion right now, you look at, for example, surveys in the West, they look at diet as well. What food are people consuming at different levels of societal, income and stuff like that.
It shows something.
It's important because it shows something, exactly. The lower level, you could say, layers of society usually go for fast food and very high carb, so all of that has an impact on how people
For almost 7 centuries, the Muqaddima has been widely regarded as the earliest and most authoritative and seminal text in the fields of sociology and history, outlining the core principles and methods needed to evaluate and convey history with a more objective and critical eye. Its celebrated author, Ibn Khaldun, pioneered a revolutionary approach to the study of history and is considered by some historians to be one of the most influential thinkers in his field. Now, for the very first time, students of Islamic history will have the rare and unique opportunity to study this monumental and classical work of genius under the tutelage and guidance of experts in the field of research and education. We offer a wide and varied range of learning experiences as part of the program, with options for students to participate in person during our on-site lessons in London or remotely via our private and secured live streaming platform. Classes are delivered on a fortnightly basis, and all students enrolling onto the program shall receive a complete learning resource pack, including coursebooks, timetables, and admission onto the online student portal. The annual program is available to students as a certificate or a diploma package, with varying subjects and module components, as well as a practical assessment unit that will culminate in the launch of student-led history projects and publications, following a panel presentation before a group of assessors. This is a unique opportunity to discover and immerse yourself into the world of Islamic historiography under the tutelage and guidance of experts who will assist you in acquiring the core skills and competencies necessary to conduct your own research and launch your own initiatives. To find out more about the Muqaddima program or to enlist yourself onto this unique and fantastic learning journey, please visit our website at www.al-Muqaddima.com, where you will be able to download our program prospectus, register your interest by submitting an application directly via the online enrollment form.